think the hardest part of losing a partner is the funeral, the tears, and the goodbyes. But they are wrong. The hardest part comes later. When the house is quiet, the phone stops ringing, and no one asks how your day was. It comes at night when you turn slightly in bed and remember, there is no one there anymore. No one warns you that after 60 loss does not scream it. Whispers, it follows you into every room. It sits with you at the table and waits for you. In the silence, they tell you to be strong. They tell you time heals, but they never tell you what it feels like to lose the only person who truly knew you. This is not a story about death. It is a story about what happens. It is a story about what happens after when life keeps going, but love has nowhere to go.
I used to believe that silence was something you earned with age. After a lifetime of work, responsibility, and constant noise, I imagined quiet as a kind of reward. I pictured slow mornings, peaceful evenings, and a home that finally allowed you to rest. What I did not understand back then was that silence and peace are not the same thing. The silence that comes after losing a partner is not gentle. It does not soothe you. It moves in quietly and settles deep inside, reminding you again and again that a life once shared now belongs only to you. The day my partner passed away, nothing in the house physically changed. The walls were still standing. The furniture was in the same place. The light came through the windows the same way it always had. But the meaning of everything shifted. Rooms that once felt warm and familiar suddenly felt hollow. The home we built together no longer felt like a place of belonging. It felt like a place filled with echoes. Every corner held a memory, and those memories spoke louder than any sound ever could. What caught me off guard were my own habits. Without thinking, I would turn my head to speak, expecting a response. I would pause after saying something, waiting for a familiar voice to answer back. Sometimes I would even smile at a thought, only to realize there was no one there to share it with. At night, my body still moved toward the empty space in the bed, as if muscle memory believed that love might return if it tried hard enough. These moments were not dramatic or sudden. They were small, ordinary, and constant, and somehow they hurt more than crying ever did. In the early days, people were kind. They called, visited, brought food, and spoke in careful, gentle voices. Their presence filled the space for a while. It made the silence feel manageable. But kindness has its limits, and life moves on. Slowly, the visits became less frequent. The phone rang less often. People returned to their routines, their families, their problems. And I was left alone with time. Time behaves differently when you are older and grieving. When you are young, time feels full of possibility. When you are older, time feels heavier. It does not rush you forward. It stretches itself out, forcing you to sit with thoughts you once avoided. Days feel longer, especially when there is no one waiting for you at the end of them. You wake up knowing exactly how the day will unfold, and that predictability can feel both comforting and deeply sad. I began to realize how much of my identity had been tied to being part of a partnership. For decades, I was not just myself. I was someone's husband, someone's companion, someone who mattered deeply to another person. Decisions were shared, even the small ones. There was comfort in knowing that someone else carried the weight of life with you. When that person disappears, you don't just lose them, you lose the version of yourself that existed because of them. I wasn't only grieving my partner, I was grieving who I had been for most of my adult life. People often assume that loss is easier when you are older. as if age somehow prepares you for it. The truth is, it becomes harder in ways few people talk about. When you lose someone later in life, you do not only lose the future you imagined, you lose the past as well. Every shared memory suddenly becomes fragile, something only you carry now. There is a strange responsibility in being the last keeper of a shared history. Stories that once belonged to two people now live in just one mind. The nights were the most unforgiving. During the day, there are distractions. Errands, television, small tasks that give structure to time. But at night, everything slows down. Darkness gives your thoughts room to wander. I found myself replaying moments I had not thought about in years. Not the big arguments or major events, but the small things. The times I was impatient. The moments I chose being right over being kind. The conversations I rushed through because I thought there would always be more time later. Regret does not shout. It whispers softly, returning again and again, asking questions you can no longer answer. What I missed most was not help or conversation. It was being known. There is a deep comfort in being understood without explanation. When you lose the one person who truly knew you, you feel exposed in a way that is hard to describe. You can sit in a room full of people and still feel completely alone, because no one sees you the way that person once did. At first, I tried to fight the silence. I filled my days with noise. The television stayed on even when I wasn't watching. The radio played just to avoid the sound of nothing. I convinced myself that staying busy meant staying strong. But silence is patient. It waits. Eventually, there was no avoiding it. I had to sit with it, listen to it, and face what it revealed. What the silence showed me was uncomfortable but honest. It revealed how much I had taken for granted, how many moments I assumed would repeat themselves forever. It reminded me that love is not measured by grand gestures, but by daily presence, by listening, by noticing, by choosing connection when it would be easier to withdraw. Over time, the silence began to change. It did not disappear, but it softened. It became a space where memories lived. Some were painful, others surprisingly comforting. I began to understand that love does not end when a person dies. It changes form. It becomes reflection, longing, and quiet lessons that stay with you. Silence, I learned, is not always emptiness. Sometimes it is the place where life finally speaks honestly, if you are willing to listen. As time passed, grief changed its shape. In the beginning, it had been sharp and overwhelming, something I felt in my chest every time I woke up. Later, it became quieter, more settled, as if it had learned how to live inside me without announcing itself. From the outside, this looked like healing. People assumed I was doing better. They asked how I was now, with a hopeful tone that suggested improvement should be linear and visible. I learned to answer gently, even when the truth was far more complex than they were ready to hear. Loneliness in old age is often misunderstood. When you are young, loneliness feels temporary, like a problem waiting for a solution. You believe someone will arrive, something will change, and the feeling will pass. When you are older, loneliness feels structural. It becomes part of the architecture of your days. Friends grow fewer, not because of distance or disagreement, but because time quietly removes them. Children build lives of their own, full and demanding, and you become a smaller part of their daily world. This is not neglect. It is the natural movement of life. But understanding it does not make it hurt less. There is also a gradual loss of visibility that comes with aging. It happens so slowly that you barely notice it at first. Conversations begin to move faster than you are comfortable with. People interrupt more easily. Your presence is acknowledged politely, but rarely centered. Society celebrates beginnings and momentum, not endurance. When you lose a partner, that invisibility deepens. You are no longer part of a pair. You no longer fit into the familiar image people recognize. You become someone they are unsure how to include, so often they don't try. What makes this loneliness especially difficult is that it is rarely spoken about. Older people are expected to be calm, grateful, and emotionally settled. There is an unspoken rule that says you should not want too much anymore. That desire, longing, and emotional hunger belong to the young. When those feelings continue to exist, as they almost always do, they are often hidden. You learn to smile through them. You learn to downplay them. You learn to carry them quietly. I felt embarrassed by my own emotions more than once. Missing closeness felt like weakness. Wanting warmth or understanding felt inappropriate, almost selfish. There were moments when I questioned myself, wondering if something was wrong with me for still feeling so deeply. It took time to realize that nothing was wrong at all. The heart does not follow the same rules as the body. It does not retire. It does not slow down simply because the years pass. It continues to feel, to remember, to reach. Aging does not erase emotional needs. In many ways, it sharpens them. As life becomes smaller and quieter, what remains becomes more important. Touch matters more. Presence matters more. Being understood matters more. Losing a partner removes the one person who met those needs without explanation. After that, you are left trying to meet them on your own, often without the language or the opportunity to do so. After my loss, conversations changed. Many people avoided depth, perhaps out of kindness, perhaps out of discomfort. They talked about weather, news, and small updates. They kept things light, as if heaviness might break something. I understood their intentions, but I felt a growing distance. I wanted honesty. I wanted reflection. I wanted to talk about what it meant to lose someone after decades, about how it reshapes the way you see yourself and the world. But sadness makes people uneasy, and unease creates distance. This led to a strange contradiction. I was rarely alone, yet deeply lonely. I was spoken to, but rarely understood. I realized that loneliness is not only about being by yourself. It is about carrying experiences that have nowhere to go. It is about feeling unseen in your inner life, even when others are physically present. Over time, I began to change the way I approached my days. I stopped expecting them to feel full or meaningful in the way they once had. Instead, I allowed them to be simple. Morning light through the window became something I noticed rather than ignored. A slow walk became an event rather than a task. Aging teaches you to pay attention, not because life demands it, but because there is less noise competing for your awareness. I also learned to stop waiting for life to return to what it was. That waiting kept me trapped in comparison. Every day felt like a reminder of what was missing. Acceptance did not arrive all at once. It came in small moments, often unnoticed at first. A moment when I realized I had spent an afternoon without thinking about time. A moment when quiet felt neutral rather than threatening. Accepting change did not mean approving of it. It meant acknowledging that life had entered a new chapter. Whether I was ready or not, being alone forced me to become intentional. There was no one else to structure my time or absorb my emotions. At first, this felt like a burden. I resented the responsibility of filling my own days and managing my own thoughts. Later, it became a quiet source of strength. Loneliness, when faced honestly, strips away illusion. It shows you who you are when there is no audience. No distraction, no role to perform. I began to see that aging is not only about loss. It is also about narrowing focus. The unnecessary slowly falls away. You care less about approval and more about peace. You care less about being impressive and more about being sincere. Loss accelerates this process. It removes distractions and leaves you face to face with what you truly value. There were days when loneliness returned heavily, without warning. I learned not to fight those days. Fighting only made them linger. Instead, I allowed myself to feel them fully. I reminded myself that feeling deeply was not a failure. It was evidence of a life lived with connection. Avoiding those feelings did not protect me. It isolated me. Life did not become easier, but it became clearer. I stopped expecting fullness where quiet existed. I stopped demanding answers where there were none. I began to understand that meaning does not come from constant activity or attention. It comes from awareness, from presence, from accepting life as it is rather than how it once was. Loneliness, I learned, is not a sign that you have failed at life. Often, it is the cost of having loved deeply and lived long enough to feel the absence. I also learned that hiding my emotions did not make me stronger. It made me quieter. There is a difference. Strength does not come from denial. It comes from honesty. Naming loneliness gave it shape. Understanding, it made it less frightening. Even when I did not share these feelings with others, acknowledging them to myself created space for acceptance. Aging and loneliness teach patience, especially with yourself. They teach you that strength does not always look like confidence or independence. Sometimes, strength looks like sitting quietly with discomfort and trusting that it will pass. It looks like allowing sadness without letting it define your entire identity. Loss never arrives as a teacher. It does not explain itself, and it does not prepare you for what comes next. It simply enters your life, changes everything, and leaves you to make sense of the aftermath on your own. Yet over time, often when you are no longer searching for meaning, loss begins to leave behind quiet lessons. These lessons are not dramatic or inspiring in the way people expect. They are subtle, slow, and deeply personal, revealed through ordinary days that no longer feel ordinary. One of the first lessons loss teaches is how little control we ever truly had. For most of our lives, we believe that effort leads to security, that love guarantees permanence, and that careful planning can protect us from pain. We believe that if we do everything right, life will respond kindly. Losing a partner dismantles that belief completely. It shows you that some of the most important things in life are never owned, only borrowed. You can do everything with love, patience, and commitment, and still be left alone. At first, this realization feels unfair and even cruel. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for moments where you could have been better, kinder, more present. You wonder if a different choice might have changed the ending. Over time, though, you begin to understand that not everything is a consequence of failure. Some endings happen simply because time moves forward. Accepting this does not remove grief, but it softens the guilt that often becomes an extra burden. You learn to separate love from outcome and effort from permanence. Another lesson loss leaves behind is the true meaning of presence. Before loss, presence feels optional. You assume there will always be another conversation, another holiday, another ordinary day to sit together without saying much. After loss, presence becomes something you wish you had understood sooner. You realize how often you were physically there, but emotionally distracted, convinced that time was endless. Loss teaches you that presence is not about grand gestures. It is about attention, about noticing, about being fully there, even in silence. Silence itself becomes one of the most unexpected teachers. When your partner was alive, silence was shared. It was comfortable, familiar, and rarely noticed. After they are gone, silence becomes heavy and intentional. It fills rooms and follows you through the house. At first, it feels unbearable, like proof that something essential is missing. Over time, silence begins to teach you how to sit with your own thoughts without escaping them. You learn that not every quiet moment needs to be filled. Some need to be felt. Loss also changes the way you understand love. When your partner is gone, love does not disappear with them. It remains active, restless, and without direction. This can be one of the most painful realizations. You still care, still want to share thoughts, still feel tenderness, but there is no one to receive it. Slowly, you learn that love does not always need a destination. It can exist as part of who you are, rather than something you constantly give away. It shows up in how patient you become, how gently you treat others, and how deeply you listen. Memory becomes another quiet teacher. In the beginning, memories arrive without warning and leave you overwhelmed. A smell, a song, or an ordinary object can pull you backward into a moment that no longer exists. Over time, memories change. They stop feeling like traps and start feeling like connections. You realize that remembering is not the same as reliving. You can hold a memory without collapsing under it. You can smile without betraying your grief. Loss teaches you that joy and sadness are not opposites. They can exist together without canceling each other out. Being alone teaches lessons no one talks about openly. In the early days, solitude feels like abandonment. It feels like life has quietly moved on without you. As time passes, solitude becomes something else. It becomes a space where you hear yourself again. You notice your own habits, your own fears, and your own resilience. You learn that loneliness and aloneness are not the same thing. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Aloneness can be a place of understanding. Loss also changes the way you see other people. You become more patient with their flaws and more aware of their hidden struggles. You stop assuming that everyone is fine just because they appear that way. You understand that many people are carrying grief quietly, without language for it. This awareness does not make you weaker. It makes you gentler. You learn to speak with more care and to listen, without rushing to fix what cannot be fixed. Another lesson loss leaves behind is the importance of routine. In the absence of shared life, routine becomes a form of stability. Simple habits like making the bed, preparing meals, or walking at the same time each day give shape to time that might otherwise feel endless. These routines are not exciting, but they anchor you. Loss teaches you that survival is often built from ordinary actions repeated patiently. You also learn that healing is not linear. Some days feel lighter, and others feel just as heavy as the beginning. Progress does not move forward in a straight line. Loss teaches you to stop measuring yourself by how well you think you should be doing. You learn to accept each day as it comes, without judgment. This lesson teaches compassion especially toward yourself. Time changes meaning after loss. Hours feel longer, and years feel strangely compressed. You become aware of time, not as something to fill, but as something to carry. You learn that waiting is part of living, and that not every unanswered question needs an answer. Loss teaches you patience, not because you want to be patient, but because there is no alternative. Perhaps the most profound lesson loss leaves behind is humility. You realize how fragile life truly is and how little separates certainty from uncertainty. This humility changes how you move through the world. You stop demanding so much from others and from yourself. You become more forgiving. You understand that everyone is doing the best they can with what they know at the time. Loss never stops hurting completely. It becomes quieter, more familiar, less demanding of attention. But the lessons it leaves behind continue to shape you. They teach you how to live with depth, how to love without ownership, and how to sit with reality as it is rather than as you wish it to be. These lessons do not erase pain, but they give it meaning. And in that meaning, life slowly finds a way to continue.